Oops. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Kind of got lost in the music there. Really nice AI
Do you
grooves.
hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Ah, okay. Sorry, I was muted somehow, that page. Sorry for that. Too
All
many
good.
windows at the same time we have open for stream, and I muted the wrong one. So, that is the human error, by the way. Good. Today, we talk about, by the way, for the last time, for everyone who's listening for now, for the summer period, that we have summer break, seeing then after the summer vacation. So, today we're talking about the human error. And we came up with that one basically because that is what we, or at least me, notice. I don't know. You can give me your opinion or ask your opinion in a moment about this, but I see it very often that there is not much of technical problem anymore out there. When I work with teams, they are mostly solved or in basically in a state where it's being solved at the time. It is not stuck anymore. So 10 years ago, 8 years ago, there was still this old Windows server, old PHP installations, legacy systems. Cloud native is new, modern frameworks, React, Vue. That is not a thing anymore. People start with something and it works, mainly. So maybe not ideal. This is not what I say, but all in all, it's something that is not a big of an issue anymore. What was left and has not changed is actually what I would call the human part of the equation, which means that the human is still the person who stays isolated. And instead of using things like AI as a team, you see then more isolation with AI instead of something like else like this, or still a lack of understanding what leadership actually means. So we still have just management out there. We still don't have in tech teams widely adopted the idea that this is a group of people working together on a shared mission. We still have this idea of I'm a software engineer, I'm employed, I need to get down my stuff. And therefore, I came up with that topic because I think we should discuss that, especially regarding tech leads, to address that. If you see that in your company, if you see that you have a lot of isolation, you have a lot of problems in your company which are actually not rooted back anymore to technical issues or lack of knowledge how to solve things, but to that teams don't really solve the problems because of X, right? So the variable is there's a lot of possibilities what the reason is, but it is most often in relation to how human beings behave, how they work together on ego and social circumstances. How do you see that issue?
Fundamentally, I think the line for human error for ownership is a bit blurred nowadays with a lot of, I wouldn't say automation, but mostly, let's say AI pipelines. Let's condense it all together and bring it together into this concept of an AI pipeline. I think most companies are building one or have a machine. Like most companies are building organizations around building an internal AI or LLM driven pipeline alongside their old CI/CD pipeline. So it's very easy to blur the lines of like, okay, if the AI makes a mistake, like is that human error? If the human makes a mistake, should the AI have corrected? But also fundamentally from this perspective of if it's a lot easier to do things on your own, do you even benefit from your organizational systems? Like that's one of the main issues that I'm seeing, which is that you said 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we used to either pair program or code review or like actively collaborate, at least on the output side. I see less of that today. Not, you know, I think it is a trend. I don't think it's gone, but it's temporarily muted. And one of the consequences of that is that it's a lot harder to figure out some equivalent of a chain of command, or some equivalent of responsibilities and ownership and sort of human judgment. Michael Feathers called this design sense, an ability to sort of tell good design from bad design, good decisions from bad decisions. There is this push in the industry right now to cram as much as possible into that AI pipeline. And I think that push, or at least that the incentives that are directing that push, are making it more difficult to clarify, or at least not blur human responsibility too much. We had this, like an AI hallucinates, deploys something to production, there's an outage. Okay, whose fault was that? Like usually we would have said, okay, that's a systems issue. But if it's a systems issue that was caused by AI, my naive old school approach would have been, okay, that's not safe to production, turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see people turning AI systems off. I see this phrasing used of, well, that's the future now, we'll just have to learn how to deal with that. And it results in a lot of almost deliberate or somewhat clumsy or somewhere in between treatment of responsibilities, or how we are structuring what sort of baseline quality expectations we have from each other, human to human, between a dev org or a product org, let alone to our customers. The customer then in the end just calls it, okay, that's a lot of spaghetti code or AI slop, etc., etc. But there still is a fundamental sort of difficulty introduced with building your AI pipeline, because the old systems are seemingly incompatible with this kind of reasoning. So most companies that I work with, all of them are seemingly building vocabulary, building new leadership models around this pipeline. Because if one situation that I have frequently is, I see a developer working on 6 things in parallel, and I know that all of the code is AI generated, and it's slop, right? And then I'm talking to them, giving them feedback on the PR. It's like, hey, whoa, slow down. That's sloppy. Like, we missed something here. And I don't know who I'm talking to. Like, is it going to be harsh? Most of the time, it's like what was approved like automatically, like either agent to agent or human agent, like human agent, human, and then back to the agent, and then it went to the CI/CD pipeline. And we don't have things usually. We don't have things like architecture decisions, like those higher level, like design sense, taste, or even arch tests fully automated across the pipeline, because they can be a little bit rigid. I don't think the tooling is evolving in that direction, and I don't think it will now that we have AI tools. So sometimes it's very hard to say, hey, this looks like AI slop to me. Let's revert all of that and do it again. And it can come up very harsh. But my problem is that it's probably not like the human who wrote it. First of all, no human wrote it, right? My concern is that the operator, or a few people who operated that kind of LLM to build that, probably missed something, or it wasn't clear who was responsible for that. And then my as a coach, my response there is like, hey, why did we approve this? Like, why is this a good thing? And what are we doing about it? And how come you missed it? And am I wrong that, this looks like slop to me? Or am I wrong? Like, do we want stuff like this? So it's these vocabularies of, like what language do I even use to not come off harsh, or how do I get your attention, or whose attention do I need? Because ultimately, if you're working on several things in parallel and the practical things are mostly taken care of, like the practical things of writing functions, using the libraries, most errors will be either security related, data management, or architecture. And we generally, like, all of the tools that automate this domain are extremely expensive, rigid, and slow. And a lot of teams that I know don't have them in the pipeline, right? Because for security, we don't have something in the pipeline. We do pen testing every 6 months, right? Like it's not like I can do like a full pen test, a human-driven pen test with every command. That's not feasible. So that's what I'm seeing, is that there are these like new kinds of challenges that require I'm tempted to say innovation, but it feels a little bit more like personal development.
What do you mean with personal development in this context?
That it's completely individuated. That it's more about us individually creating new relationships with ourselves and with our organizations of, am I fine with this? It's like, okay, we moved fast and we created some slop. Am I fine with this? It's very difficult to articulate how, or it's not difficult to articulate. It's what I would find objectionable is if we just increased the pace and started using AI tools in a way that allowed individuals to work a lot faster in parallel with each other. And what I find objectionable is if that resulted in a severe deterioration of interpersonal relationships and architecture in the system. Because ultimately, if the personal relationships get worse and the architecture gets worse, down the line we'll have a lot of problems. And then we won't have the trust necessary pre-established to deal with them. So it's just a ticking time bomb. Like, structurally, I look at that and I'm like, that's a ticking time bomb, right? Like that's the kind of project that we would like to dismantle and analyze and dissect and say, okay, there's a lot of risk factors going on in all directions here. I don't want to intrude if that is deliberate, but if it's clumsy or if it's, malpractice in some sense or deliberately being a bit dodgy, then I would definitely want to intervene. But the problem is that at the pace that it's happening, a lot of it seems benignly intentional. But then you got to put some guardrails on the human behavior in addition to the AI.
I don't think that the AI is the reason. So I don't think you have said that, but I don't think that as well. I think that what we see is the AI reveals something. The AI reveals issues which were always there, but we were much slower in what we were doing. Most companies didn't have the ability, or most persons in the teams, the ability to do things by themselves. They needed to talk more to other people in order to get things done. So if a developer has issues with a Linux box today, they just fix it with ChatGPT or Cloud Code or something like that, instead of asking a colleague. And so I see, so we have, in theory, more time with AI. And what I see is people talk less with each other about that. So leaders need to actually implement more timeframes where actually people talk together than it was necessary before. Because before that, I grew up like this in software development, sitting next to someone else for half of the day. Either it was bug fixing, it was discussing something. You were not sitting alone all day long. And today, more and more people becoming, it's like in social media, you sit alone there doom scrolling, and now you sit alone there coding. No, okay, you watch
not
something
even coding
for you.
like doom scrolling AI output.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you use the time to ask to optimize the cloud, the token bill, because I do that for. I use the time in between the agent is running to ask other agents other things. it shifted so much, and I realized that you lose a little bit this need to talk to other people, because you have the feeling, and I read that very often, that people nowadays, that's part of the human error as well, have the urge or have never learned what to do when you are actually getting one procedural task faster. So instead of putting the next right after it or in parallel, maybe talk to other people about that. Should we do that? These kind of things, reviews. Actually use the time, not for pair programming, but pair reviewing, because pair programming is pretty useless when you use AI. But pair programming, pair reviewing, for example, is like, do we actually need to do this? Is that the right approach? Because AI can produce a lot, but if you don't steer it correctly, and I doubt that a human being can focus 8 hours a day on a machine doing 5 things at the same time and say that, yeah, I know, I know it like I was writing it myself. I don't believe that. I see it with myself, that I have much less knowledge about how the systems actually work nowadays than just 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was heavily involved in all steps and all actions of the softwares we made. Today, I'm still present, but somehow it's not like, it's not like you don't really, I realized that I need to tell the people, I need to take a look. I don't know. That wasn't happen.
I mean, from a perspective of, so what you said at the beginning there is very important, that people ask the AI instead of talking to a human. And that can be a good thing. I see plenty of reports of organizations claiming that their onboarding time has increased. I mean, has sped up, and that it is a lot smoother because people, especially with Gen Zers, especially with like GPT first generation of developers, they ask the robot, and the robot usually finds them the correct answer. So they onboard themselves extremely quickly to an organization without needing to rely what traditionally looked like I kind of need to predict what could go wrong in onboarding and catalog that, and then as I onboard you, we'll probably find something new, and I'll have you then update the wiki and you onboard the next person, right? So instead of sort of that process, or in addition to it, there's a lot more self-service, let's say, right? Like I no longer need somebody to service, to provide an onboarding experience. I can do it myself. And in that sense, I would flag that as a universal positive, except that usually in a context where onboarding is difficult, you would then usually get assigned a mentor or a buddy or a sponsor, and that person helping you would actually build your first relationship in the organization. So now if you're like leaning all the way into the self-service camp, now you're devoid of that relationship. So when there's actually something going wrong, or if you make a mistake, now the sort of self-healing path of, okay, how do I not blame myself here, or how do I not lose face here? The AI hallucinated it, and I didn't know enough to question it, and I made a mistake. How do I now approach this? These kinds of issues are popping up, and we don't really have a well-established guidebook for it. Plus, it's also the younger generations, they're sort of leaning more towards this kind of experience. So you also get this sort of ageism bias of older managers, looking at the younger generation as if they're reckless when they run into this kind of situation, especially since they're more likely to not have a good, well-established relationship with them.
I think
you also mentioned that it might not be with the AI, like the cause isn't AI itself. that this was always there, and I agree. In a lot of organizations, this was always there. It just had to be dealt with somehow, and usually I have to deal with it required some introspection and cultural work and leadership work. And I feel like with the AI era, at least when it comes to self-service and building a chatbot internally, or building a machine or an AI pipeline, or building a customer-facing AI chatbot, a lot of this can now be pushed off to the IC layer. And it, for better or for worse, might involve less management, less leadership. That
it can be good if the team does it on a natural way, but I think this is the problem. So the problem, the human error, is that we actually so we have the tendency to avoid and stress with other people we don't know. So we act just with our tribe. The tendency to see that direct colleagues is often not the tribe. So for us, the tribe are more like friends or something like that. But the colleagues is a little bit like, yeah, I need to somehow interact with them, but I try to avoid it. And I think that is the biggest difference, especially in remote first environments. I see that very much, that people who still have the tag, I am new in this company, and then I ask how new, and they say 3 months, and then I say, you are not new in the company, that's 3 months. 2 weeks is new in the company. But it's like, I need more time, and I'm still quiet, I don't really know, and I ask questions about how people feel about other people, and there's a little bit, most often you hear this, I don't really know this person. It's like, guys, how do you actually don't know each other? It's like, that is the issue. And AI just enhances that, because as you said, as we said, is AI helps you to stay a lone wolf for longer, until you need to have the feeling that you need to ask someone, even though you should, but you say, I can't do this myself, so why should I bother spending energy in conversations with other people? Maybe the people see that I make a mistake with all this stuff I barely understand here, so I just discuss it with AI. No one sees what I do with the AI. And I think this is a little bit the case.
I mean, despite this sort of alienation and disconnect, if you look at, for example, the subreddit experience devs, there's still plenty of questions which are of this nature of, hey, I'm new to the company, I deployed something I shouldn't have, it was a mistake, I made a whoopsie in production, am I in trouble? My manager looked at it, they asked me immediately, what the heck happened, why did you do this? And then they now don't know like how big of a problem this is, and they're now looking for advice of, hey, am I in trouble? Is this like a big oopsie, small oopsie? How do I handle something like this? Which is normal. And I'm glad they're asking it on a subreddit, not their AI. Although I'm sure there's a lot of people who are looking, using their AI chatbot as therapy. And fundamentally, we always calm such a situation down by telling this person, no, that's a systems error. Like your pipeline should have caught it, and if you had full write access, you should have been like, there was a process mistake. Like, either you shouldn't have permission to do that, or if you do have permission to do that, there should at least be one safety net in preventing you from doing it. And unless you deliberately skipped all of those safety nets, you should probably be fine. These things happen. Just make sure that you learn from it, that your organization learns from it, without you taking such a personal hit that you would be utterly defensive or just mentally checked out to even learn from the situation. Right? So I would always articulate this as, crap happens. It's a cheap lesson. Learn from it and move on. But there is this element, you said it's not AI caused, but I would say that with AI agents, so with fully autonomous AI pipelines, it is possible that these mistakes happen and nobody learns from them. That there is this almost detachment from the production cycle. Like some tasks are done by humans, and sometimes tasks are done by robots, and it's a lot harder to learn from mistakes that are done by the robots. Right? Like, because you have to go in and analyze, okay, well, who prompted this? Or what series of prompts resulted in this behavior? Like, what was because most organizations don't have a full event stream of how did we prompt this output, right? I mean, Meta does. They're like, full on internal surveillance about what prompt was used, who's prompting it, which can also be embarrassing, right? Some people are having private conversations with their chatbots, and they don't expect it to be surveilled so heavily. So it can be very difficult to and there is almost this element of your chat history with your what you would consider personal AI. So your locally installed Cloud Code or Cloud Cowork or Codex, it almost has this element of, it feels like my personal browser history. So there's almost this element of, hey, that's a bit intrusive if you now ask me to give you all of my logs for what did I prompt it so that we can solve this issue, right? So there is that element, especially if you accidentally started creating memories from all of the conversations you're doing on your computer with the AI that you're using inside your software creation or like product reasoning pipeline, so that it sort of blurred the lines. And now if I'm like, okay, the AI made a mistake, I need your logs. There is this almost wait, no, I can't share all of that.
That's so personal.
Yeah, I might have just copy pasted a lot of random stuff in there that's not supposed to be shared, right? So there is definitely that level of.
But that is another issue. So if you have a working related stuff and you can't share that with your colleagues, there is another issue going on.
No, I'm not saying that it was work related, right? I mean more about I see a lot of people have a one-on-one conversation, for example, right? So you do a PR, you do a commit, your manager comes in, gives you feedback, and then that person, what they would do is they would now maybe put this feedback into their favorite LLM and ask them to summarize it, adjust their skills to help them learn this, to improve based on the feedback. And maybe that conversation was private. Now, if I ask you for access to either the memory created here, or sort of if it creates a mistake and I now need to introspect or help you figure out what went wrong, I also accidentally you might expose that thing to me, which was based on a private conversation or a private Notion document or a completely private, or maybe not private, but just deliberately unrecorded call, or like gather, like a quick huddle. So that can quickly become sticky. It's sort of, most AI tools introduce an element of surveillance into most organizations. And I think that's really why the big hype there is on the stock market regarding AI tools, because it basically requires you to record everything you're doing, right? So there is definitely a secondary interest here with maintaining such sort of automated surveillance systems. But that also means that then, 20 years ago, when I started in the industry, you sitting behind my shoulder and watching me code would be like unacceptable. It's like, no, don't watch my code. I will write it, and then when it's ready, you can see it. And we didn't even have version control, right? We didn't use Git. Like, Git didn't exist, or at least we didn't use it. It's probably existed exactly 20 years ago.
Subversion was the way to go.
Subversion was the way to go, or Tortoise, or CBS. So there was definitely that ick involved with you looking at my code and giving me feedback, and that's a skill that a lot of people have to learn. And usually they learn it gently. They have a lot of like feedback that they're not prepared for. It seems harsh, and then they sort of learn to detach themselves from the output, so that they have this sort of egoless relationship of, yes, I wrote it, but if there's a problem with it, we can fix it. I might be attached to certain decisions I've made, or I might have some design in my head that I need to maintain or enforce in order for me to not lose sight of what I'm building. And maybe your view of it is different and you disagree, and then that can be sometimes constructive, sometimes unconstructive. And part of being on a team is like let's say the quality of the engineering culture and the leadership space is how natural those conversations are, or how difficult they are, or how needlessly difficult they are, or how sticky they are, or how many times people start arguing, or second generation, how many people don't even ask other people for advice, because usually the conversations end up being unconstructive or harsh. So with AI tools, there's this baseline surveillance element being introduced into most organizations. And for a lot of leaders, that's just difficult to deal with, because it's like, are we default in? Are we default out? Like, how do we protect like our own interests here? Like, what would be the default baseline long-term healthy thing to do for everybody?
That's a good point, because Vanessa said that as well. She wrote, I think leadership also has a role in the situations of coming in new employees talking to each other. Leadership should create opportunities and model ways for a team to still work together and have interactions. That's essentially what you just said, right? So it is a leadership problem. It is not a management problem. I still think that it is not clear that there is actually a distinction. One, the management is about the organization of a team, of budget, of headcounts. And leadership is what happens in the relation between people. And if there is no relation in between people because everyone is isolated, there's probably no leadership involved, because you need to lead this, align this, and get the people together, because normally, especially in such environments, people don't see the need to get together. It is not a survivor situation where people are forced to work together. They find ways to say, I can thrive here on my own. And that is a problem that, that it is it, well, can we say that? Is it a little bit like, is it a too friendly environment where the sole person feels like extremely safe? Thus, I don't need to talk to others anymore, because then I could even make it less safe.
Friendly. What I understood you to mean was that, like, is it enabling too much some kind of comfort bubble where you could just create a bubble around yourself, and that would be completely
a bubble of
like very easy to do.
Leads to hedonism, and hedonism
exactly.
discipline. This is the problem.
So that everybody creates their sort of AI incentivized happy place, and then they don't want to leave it, and then usually talking to other people is the main conflict area. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, I think so. So now, since Vanessa is actually a philosopher, she's from my Substack, I think. Hello, Vanessa, by the way. We had a chat
Vanessa.
in a conversation. And I would like to make a little metaphor bridge here, because we see the tendency in when we're using AI to become more isolated, more comfortable, let the AI do the stuff, and I have a less complicated life. That is the idea. The problem is that human beings are essentially driven towards saving energy. That is what happens in our minds. And this is even why the most adopted philosophies out there, which is hedonism, this is the most adopted philosophy. No one actually understands that this is a philosophy while practicing. It's basically saving energy, or reducing pain and increasing pleasure in order to be happy, which is not happiness. But this is what we do, and AI helps us doing that in the company we work in as software developers. And I think I would put out the claim, because when I think I just made it up for myself, but then I realized, no, it's not really made up. It is just a pattern which comes together now when I just reflect the teams I have right now. It's like we see this. Let's say 70 or more % of the people I see in these teams try to act exactly like this. They don't try to get to another person, solve proactively a problem, or become better for the team by tomorrow by themselves. So it's a little bit, you need to pull the people to become better, give them direct incentives to do so, or tell them to do so. Otherwise, they don't. So the movement just by yourself, because you want to become better using AI to become better, actually not so much. AI is actually used to make life easier instead of more efficient. That is somehow something I would like to point out as a theory right now. It's a hypothesis, but I think it can be true that this is a general tendency.
On the topic of hedonism, I'm also seeing. Hey, Daniel. Cannot lead silos. Cannot lead silos. It is. Would you consider a person working alone but still interacting with the CI/CD pipeline and the AI pipeline? Would you consider that a silo?
Yeah.
Okay.
I personally would. For me,
I always thought of silos as an organizational concept. So I always just assumed, or at least my brain wanders more towards, okay, that's a group of people.
No, a silo can be the typical single person, the brand, right? The brand of Phoenix Project was a silo defined as
yes, if they were not using the pipeline, but using the pipeline, that there's basically this sort of lifeline leading out of the silo.
But you could reduce you could reduce it, like instead of if you don't have a pipeline but an FTP upload, and you just you're not more part of the team than before.
No, what I mean is that they are not devoid of feedback, right? So there is, okay, but as an aside, maybe if Daniela gives us a little bit more fuel, we can continue this thread. Vanessa has a.
I'll try to put it on screen.
Wait, what happened, by the way? We had 15 people on YouTube, and then
this is just because of I explain later. That's
okay. And then it seems to crash, and now everybody's
it's not
on
crashing.
Substack.
What we see is that the algorithm just pushes people onto our stream.
Like random.
Take a look if
bots.
they are, and and most of the philosophy people of my channel think like, what the fuck is CI/CD? Go away again.
Okay, fair. Vanessa had another comment. Until guidelines and guardrails are created for us, we must make guardrails for ourselves.
In regards to AI.
Yeah. I wouldn't even stop at guardrails. I would also. So, before we go there, you mentioned hedonism. Engineers are a interesting group of people. Like we engineers, we like things more than people, and we like being in our head and dealing with the machine. And we went down into this career to build things, to craft, to tinker, and to just come up with new kinds of products, new kinds of systems, solve puzzles. And of all the things that is the most useful in our industry, it's people skills, right? So it's the exact group of people who don't want to work with another human being, that where the biggest leveraging factor is getting along with other people.
But they do with other people in the evening when playing World of Warcraft.
Yes, it's a good point.
With 40 people they play.
Unless they're bots. So there's that, right? And that's quite a traditional take. Like, we don't need to be contextualizing that take with sort of any kind of AI era flair. But then what I'm hearing now from sort of social media, conferences, leadership meetings, coaching clients is a expression of anhedonia, where developers don't experience joy from using AI systems to build code, because apparently for their experience or for some kind of dopamine loop, touching the code manually was apparently a much bigger factor than we thought. So even though there are these like maybe self-reported productivity gains, I can definitely see some gains. The gains generally don't translate out into the organization. Usually it is local optimization for most people, for most individuals, especially silos, as Daniela mentioned. And I see that Daniela has a new comment already. But now we have this problem of engineers, senior engineers, experienced engineers, whom we need, especially now in such an era. They report not enjoying their work anymore. At least some of them. And for some, that's an imposter response. For some, it's a sign of resistance. For some, it's like I'm much happier not having to code. But then, if the alternative is that I now need to review AI slop all day, that's even worse. And if I run this to the extreme, there's this sort of anhedonic response. What I'm seeing is that there's also coping mechanisms happening, and recently there was this like spurt of popularity. Like Uncle Bob mentioned something about, hey, I don't review my code anymore. I expect my pipeline to be strong enough, right? And then it is like went like wildfire across social media. I got 5 million views on Twitter. About
I would never
how
trust my pipeline. I only trust my code.
See that like exactly that attitude, right? Of okay, would that be now something objectable in this sort of new era? Because it definitely would have been some while ago, let's say 3-5 years ago. Because if engineers will burn out reviewing AI slop all day long, then we lose a lot of talented people. But at the same time, the only way, if we are going to continue using AI tools like that, if they're not going to review, then we need to invest their time and attention and focus into making the pipelines better. So there is no, at least I don't see it. I don't see a future or a solution space here where talented people with good design sense, with good architecture sense, with good security sense, if they won't spend their time improving the pipeline or improving the harness or improving the AI pipeline, then they'll be basically sidelined to just sitting back and reviewing AI slop all day. And hopefully their review will result in a process improvement or skill update in an AI, if lucky, right? Like somebody still has to learn from it. And the reviewer usually has nothing to learn from it. Like a review, when I open a PR, the purpose of the PR is to teach the author something. So if there's no human in the loop, then the review is kind of useless. You're just testing it, right? And that should always be handled by the pipeline. So that's very dangerous. It's very dangerous to diminish the human in the loop to the capacity of a tester rather than a reviewer, because a reviewer is meant to teach another human being and upskill them.
I think one of the problems with AI is the reason why I think that it shifts more into the personal. If you push something, is that even if you ask someone to review what the AI has done, you get feedback, and that will be prompted to the AI to fix it. It doesn't make sense to ask another human because no one is actually going through this code like you were doing that before. Because before you wrote something, you knew like 90% of still in memory what you have written there, and then someone tells you something about that, and in your mind you basically merge that with the stuff you have done, learn something out of it. But if you don't know the code anymore, you only know the idea behind that, and you saw it during the time when it was written that it was okay for you, looks good to me, right? Hashtag looks good to me.
Yeah.
And then you show it to someone else and he does, I don't like this part. And then you tell the AI, I fixed this part, and you're done. So why reviewing? It's a little bit like, I don't know.
Since you mentioned AI review or self-review, there is this new paper. I mean, new. When was it? I mean, it's from 2026, so it's fairly recent. The title of the paper is Self-Preference Bias in Rubric-Based Evaluation of Large Language Models. I will drop it in chat. When I get past my 40 tabs.
You actually sound better when you glue yourself to the screen.
You mean the microphone? So the paper is about researching bias, where basically it's trying to put a number on how often does the same AI model that generated code or some kind of output, if you then use the same context, the same agent, the same model to review what it did, if you use the same thing to review itself, the likelihood of it having bias in its judgment, so bias in the direction of it will prefer the thing it created rather than being what from a human perspective we would call objective, right? So that the AI, the same AI in review mode seems to exhibit what we would call subjective bias, like either as the author or being poisoned by the context window. So this paper basically researched which models tend to do that the most, and they were able to show a strong enough correlation where models will generally do that to themselves. So if you have the same agent, the same context window do it, then you're very likely to just hallucinate. So if you ask it to review itself, it's kind of pointless, right? So then that's where the recommendation comes from of, hey, use a different agent to review than what you created it with, or at the very least flush the context window, like start from scratch. Right. So again, it tries to mimic, if I anthropomorphize it, it tries to mimic this idea of, okay, like the author should do self-review, but if you really want to learn something, you should involve another human being. Like you shouldn't just rely on your own approval of your code because you are biased, and you're much more likely to miss something. Which is the same reason why we have feedback loops in our systems, in our pipelines, like that. That was the essence of extreme programming and all of the processes and systems that came out of sort of that kind of thinking. But what was shocking in the paper was that the tendencies seem to gravitate towards similar models, so the same family of models. So a codex model would be more likely to sort of show this bias if the output was coming from a codex model, even if it wasn't the same agent, compared to a different model, compared to if it was coming from Opus or if it was coming from one of the open source models. So it's interesting because we always had this sort of prompt engineering inspired advice of, hey, don't use the same agent to review, or even bigger than that, like don't use the same model to review, like you use a smarter model. And now we're also seeing evidence of, hey, don't even use the same family of models, like have Claude build it and then have Codex review it. And it seems we're also now getting the ultimate element of it, of maybe a human needs to be in the loop to also analyze what bias was displayed on a,
But
let's
just
say,
to have
a
not the
weekly
same
amount of
bias
outputs.
doesn't make it more correct. That's one of the issues as well.
No, so it's not so much about correctness. It's just looking for how likely it was to make this mistake, right? So, for example, one of the Chinese models often tends to cheat, where you write code and you ask it to review it, it would hallucinate wildly just to be right? Whereas generally what we would want from a reviewer would be like an opposing opinion. Like you would basically look for somebody to go look for problems and really talk you out of deploying unless it can't find anything. And then that's a sort of fairly repeatable scientific method to establish such a guardrail. But it's interesting to see the models themselves exhibit these kind of biases that I would expect from a human. And again, like the math involved in the paper is like way above my pay grade. Like I did some machine learning, but this is still a little bit too much for me to like really understand the nitty gritty of why this is happening. But it's nice to see some. It's nice to see some solid data, and some solid science, hard science around prompt engineering advice.
But I'm still a big fan of that. Mistakes should be seen by me as a human being, not necessarily by the machine. Because if we systemize that the machine needs to find it, and we optimize for ways that the machine finds it, for me it is a fallback. It is a reserve securing mechanism if mine fails, but I need to stay in responsibility and ownership in the first place. I need to make a manual test. I need to write a test for this. I need to be sure that what I see works, and I need to know what kind of things that change will affect next to what I see on the screen. If I don't understand the side effects, I cannot push it to product. It's not possible, and I am the person who's pushing it to production, so I need to know that. And even if I have pushed it to production, I still do the last manual sanity check on production regarding that feature, or maybe even ask someone to take a look. Do you like it? Do you have any issue with that? I personally like that, and I don't think that any LLM can do this. And now getting back to the original topic of the human error, is the human error is always when the human tries to avoid. So the human error is a alias for procrastination. It is an alias for I want to talk to people. I want to avoid to have to spend a lot of time and energy into reviewing, into optimizing. There is no reason with all the AI on this planet to not ask a colleague, hey, I'm insecure. This is a change over 5 files. One of this file is even something I haven't worked on so far. You have worked on that mainly in the knowledge base. Your name is there. Would you have 30 seconds to take a look over that if you see any issue? And if there is any issue, have you 5 minutes to discuss that. That's it. You don't need AI for this. In my opinion, AI for AI is the wrong thing to do.
Absolutely.
That is my personal opinion. You can use AI afterwards, if you like, to find mistakes a human can't see. The typical things like, when I make this change, is anything else, something attached or something like that, or affected, which I may not see as a human being and will see in production. And it says no, then fine. But I don't rely on that. In first place, I am the engineer, and my experience counts. So, because if that wouldn't be the case, we actually would be able to say someone who is like 3 months into this profession, that this person is now considered as a senior because AI is handling everything: planning, executing, reviewing. Fine, it's not. And that is one of the human mistakes or human errors in general, is the absolute problem with understanding who you are. Because one of the 5 biggest foundings of philosophy and psychology is that we are a very bad narrator, a very bad and dishonest narrator about our own mind, because we believe a version of ourselves that we are actually not. And as an entire team of 10, you have more than 20 personalities there. because 10 who believe, which they are, and 10 others who are actually doing the work, and it's all fake. And that is the core issue. And since we don't fix that because we procrastinate, because we don't have the self-discipline, it's what Vanessa actually said. It's, or you, I don't know. It's like the time into that process yourself, by yourself. You can't wait just for a leader to fix that for you. You need to fix it always by yourself. The leader is the person who gives the mission, alignment, and direction. Right? And if someone is not capable, lend a hand. But a leader doesn't have 10 hands in a team of 5, or 10 hands in a team of 10. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just the self-discipline is extremely important, and it's, I think, the core issue here.
I would, honoring Daniela's comments about, Daniela said, well, if people don't feel part of something bigger, they will self-isolate. What I would echo here with, and I agree with Daniela, is that it's also not enough to just have this sort of singular, individuated discipline. We also need to show discipline with regards to continuous improvement along the entire organization, a culture of improvement, right? It's not enough that the AIs are generating so much that we can't keep up and we just need to make sure we don't miss anything. That's not good enough. We also need to improve the process so that we don't need to be this vigilant all the time, right? So that somebody in leadership, you, the leader, your manager, your boss, or that you're incentivizing each other so that you're self-correcting, or at least you're self-governing to such a degree that as a group, you don't need to elect a leader, but you can all show leadership ability, where you encourage each other to prevent mistakes from reoccurring that you've already observed happening. So if an AI makes a mistake, don't just patch it up and then move on. If it happened once, and if you think that this is a fairly benign mistake to make sure that you then introduce a system afterwards where you prevent this mistake and you hold each other accountable to this kind of standard, that you show at least such a bar for leadership expectations where we're a team and it wasn't your mistake, it was something that our process, our guardrails missed. And if we missed it once, it's not enough to correct the problem. We also need to correct the guardrail. And this is a fairly old concept. Like, generally in this sort of more traditional SDLC, this is the essence of TDD, so test-driven development, and CD, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, where if you make a mistake or if there's a bug, not only do we need to fix the bug, but we also need to fix the thing in the process that has allowed it to be created. So either we need to verify for this kind of mistake earlier on in the process, or we need to now catch the mistake's resurgence in some kind of regression mechanism. And for any kind of future work, we also need to be working in advance in such a way that if we know that we are now creating a new thing that could have the same problem as that what we already saw, we also need to bake in some kind of isolated test in advance, like test first, so that we already detect before we roll out to production that this is indeed not happening, right? So hospitals, for example, do this. Like, the whole field of medicine is all over this kind of process improvement, right? Because generally you need to make a lot of mistakes over a long stretch of time and then hold a vast memory to actually identify what can be avoided. Like, where did we have enough knowledge at the time to actually avoid the problem? Because obviously, if you just ask your LLM to spitball something, the space of it making a mistake is infinite. So you need to tell it in advance what you want and what you don't want. So I find it increasingly difficult in my coaching practice to even keep up with the vocabulary of, guys, what we need to do. And this is a fairly frequent conversation nowadays, where, guys, we need to teach the pipeline to reject more of our stuff, and not the humans, but like, we need to build something into our pipeline that will reject more of the stuff that we don't want, that we, the humans, consider to be in bad taste, that we, the humans, consider to be slop, that we, the humans, consider to be risky, even though factually correct and it runs on production. I wouldn't want to maintain a system that looks like that or is shaped like that. And we need to be able to write down how we detect this and how we want to prevent it, and teach our systems to slow us down, essentially, right? Which is a very awkward situation to be in. On one side, you have this sort of productivity promise of, oh wow, coding is solved, it's going to be so much faster now, but the organizations are not experiencing it on the same scale. It's almost like the effect is logarithmic. Like, the engineers are like isolating some kind of huge productivity benefit, but then the organization isn't vastly making a lot more profit. And then on top of that, we're also saying, oh yeah, but we also need to slow it down a little bit because we can't keep up with the amount of slop it's creating. So clearly there's something, a guardrail missing, or a pipeline issue, or a testing issue, or we actually don't know, the humans, we don't know how to describe what it is that we don't want. Like, we don't know how to articulate something that we might consider to be in bad taste, or in bad faith, or undesirable detail about the maintainability of the system or its architecture, or the way that the AI then ignores human feedback, or blatantly, talks back, or hallucinates, or pretends that no, I reviewed my own code and I found no issues with it, right? So we need to be careful about this. And definitely this decade will be about building vocabularies about how to even approach these kinds of systems problems in organizations. And that's going to be, from my perspective, the main leadership topic to be on the lookout for. Because it's fairly novel, and especially with the frontier LLMs improving as fast as they are, it's not only a moving target, but the target is moving very fast, and course correcting quite often.
Good. That was a fine conversation today. Thanks for everyone listening, tuning in. Actually, quite a lot of people today.
Mm-hmm.
And so any last words?
Subscribe to us on YouTube. We are, it'll help us, it'll help you stay in touch. Also, again, summer vacation, so we'll be gone now, at least for the next 2 episodes. So next week and the week after that, there won't be a stream. We might be doing something on our personal channels, maybe. There's definitely not going to be OTJ, and if we're back on that 3rd week, or if we're still going to be traveling, we'll let you know, because that 3rd Wednesday will also be is unsure for me, at least. So yeah, if you're also going on summer holiday, beginning of August, enjoy. Try to get away from the computer, enjoy the sea, enjoy the sun, enjoy socializing, spending time with your friends and family, with your kids. And see you soon. And thank you for spending this hour.
Yeah, looking forward for the episode where we both go the 50 kilometers march and discuss tech all day long. That will be
pretty cool. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah. You only need to get to Freiburg, and then we can do that in 2 months.
In winter?
No. Look, here, I have put my patch again on, because that's my training patch. I'm on the training again since several weeks now, actually. Backpack running. It's actually fairly interesting how much good ideas you get when your mind is so exhausted it doesn't have time to fixate itself on unnecessary things anymore, and you are absolutely clear. I only can recommend this to anyone who's working in tech. It must not be a backpack, because that's sometimes a little bit insane, but just going out and exhausting yourself sometimes helps you to fix tech issues just by itself, because your mind normally knows what to do, but because you're simply distracted with focus and defocus topics. Yeah, anyway, now I'm getting into the next topic. Maybe we should do that next time then.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Daniele.
Yeah.
Vanessa, thank you so much for your insights, for your comments.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was great. See you next
See
time.
you in a while.
Have a good time.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.